Hello, everybody. Welcome to Lesson 8. In Lesson 8, you're going to be taking a look at Upton Sinclair and reading an excerpt from his novel, The Jungle. Upton Sinclair was a muckraking journalist who was prevalent during the Progressive Era in U.S. history. If you recall from Lesson 7, the Progressive Era was a period of widespread reform in the U.S. And a lot of that reform was around workers' rights, working conditions, the formation of unions, but also we saw efforts to break up political corruption, as well as break up monopolies and trusts in an effort to create a more competitive business environment. If you recall from Lesson 7, it wasn't a perfect time. Much of the reforms that were proposed were primarily designed or meant to benefit white people and not necessarily people from minority groups in the United States. But nevertheless, it was a period of dramatic change in the U.S. Back to Upton Sinclair, he, again, a muckraking journalist. He specialized in exposing atrocious conditions that workers were facing at the time. And his book, The Jungle, his most famous work, is about the meatpacking plants of Chicago. He was a socialist. He believed that the government should facilitate the sharing of wealth instead of allowing rich people to accumulate it. So he would have been opposed to an Andrew Carnegie, right? Someone who believed that in social Darwinism, who believed that that a division between rich and poor was a natural state. So he would have been more drawn to someone like Karl Marx, who we talked about in a previous lesson as well, in terms of his socialist views. When Sinclair wrote The Jungle, he wasn't really out to his goal was really to build sympathy for workers. His goal was to expose the horrible conditions that the workers in these plants had to go through every single day. But when the book came out, what really happened is it started motivating concerns about food safety, because people who read the book realized that a lot of the food coming out of these meatpacking plants was unsanitary and unsafe. So again, while his stated objective was to expose and make change for the workers in these plants, really what he did led to major congressional action in the government to pass the Pure Food and Drug Act, which ultimately created the Food and Drug Administration, which allowed the U.S. government gave the U.S. government power in large oversight ability over private industry to make sure that the food they were producing and putting on the shelves of grocery stores and into the hands of consumers was safe. Interesting side note, to write the book, The Jungle, Upton Sinclair actually went undercover and worked in these meatpacking plants himself for 2 months. So the document, again, we're going to be looking at for Lesson 8 is an excerpt from The Jungle. Just fair warning, I think you will find it quite disturbing. He's going to be describing the hardships faced by immigrants who worked in these meatpacking factories, but he's going to be doing it in a fairly graphic way. And that was intentional, right? He wanted to create shock. He wanted to shock the public into action. So here's just a few notable quotes just to give you an idea of what you'll be looking at. He says, "There were the wool pluckers, whose hands went to pieces even sooner than the hands of the picklemen. For the pelts of the sheep had to be painted with acid to loosen the wool, and then the pluckers had to pull out this wool with their bare hands, till the acid had eaten their fingers off." Later in the passage, he talks about a different area of the factory. He says, "In some rooms there were open vats near the level of the floor. The workers' peculiar trouble was that they fell into the vats, and when they were fished out, there was never enough of them left to be worth exhibiting. Sometimes they would be overlooked for days, till all but the bones of them had gone out to the world as Durham's pure leaf lard." So he's essentially saying that people would fall into these vats of meat, and they would never be discovered, and essentially these human remains would be going out to the public as a food product. So, on that note, I hope you enjoy reading the document. If you want more information about Upton Sinclair and his work around the jungle, I did just post a short video, it's about a 3-minute video, on Sinclair on the Google Classroom assignment as well. Let me know if you have any questions, and I look forward to discussing the document in class.